Chapter. So Blount Mansion was built in 1792 for William Blount. This is one of 3 or 4 images that we have of Blount. And he could in many ways be considered the father of Tennessee, although he had some competition for that title. Blount was a signer of the US Constitution from North Carolina. So there's his name on the signature page, and Blount is pictured in this famous 1940s painting of the Constitutional Convention, standing right beside George Washington. In 1790, Blount was appointed by George Washington to govern the Southwest Territory. This was the area that would become the state of Tennessee. And you have to understand that at the time, originally, North Carolina stretched all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. And there were furtive attempts to okay. I think I'm muted. Am I unmuted now? In 1784, there was an attempt to create the state of Franklin in Northeast Tennessee. That failed because North Carolina didn't want to let all this land go. But shortly thereafter, Congress was going to tax every state based on its land mass to pay for the Revolutionary War debt. So suddenly there was a huge financial incentive for North Carolina to let this land go. So they ceded it to the federal government, and it became a federal territory, much like Puerto Rico is today. And William Blount was appointed by George Washington to govern this vast territory because Blount and his brothers had invested in hundreds of thousands of acres of land. Now, Blount's jobs were multifaceted. He was responsible for signing a peace treaty with the Cherokee to make it possible for white settlers to move peaceably into the area beyond the mountains. He also took a census and determined that there were enough people to create a state. And for that reason, we call Blount Mansion the birthplace of Tennessee. Our house was the territorial capital when it was the Southwest Territory. And then Blount and 54 other signers or framers of Tennessee statehood signed the first state constitution of Tennessee on this desk, David Henley's desk, which is now in Governor Blount's office. And this is a special time to talk about this because Tennessee will be 225 years old this June 1st. And Blount Mansion, as the birthplace of Tennessee, is trying to take the leading role in celebrations of that birthday, this auspicious event. So you can check that out on tnstatehood.com, and I'll put that in the chat in just a minute. But if you ever do come to Blount Mansion, one of the things you'll be able to do is see the desk that's really the birthplace of Tennessee. Because of Blount's role as a U.S. Constitution signer and his role as the territorial governor, Blount Mansion is the only National Historic Landmark in Knox County. And we are the oldest museum as well, having operated since 1926. So if you come to Blount Mansion today, just give you a quick peek inside. It's kind of like a time capsule. It's a slice of the 18th century that sits in an urban canyon boxed in by steel and glass skyscrapers and concrete freeways. And it's really a place that it feels like time just forgot. Now, in reality, this is the result of a massive restoration and museum effort over many decades. But we've done the best that we can to try to give people a feeling that they've stepped into Governor Blount's home. So you see the main room, which we've set up as a dining room here on the upper left, an addition on the lower left that was added in the early 19th century, Governor Blount's office in the middle, and again, that addition, apparently I put the same picture twice, and then here is our kitchen, which plays a role in our field trips. The other thing that makes Blount Mansion special in our part of the state is that we're the only public garden in downtown Knoxville. The Knoxville Garden Club has cared for our garden since 1934. We're also a place that is striving to tell the story of voiceless people from the past, specifically in this case, the enslaved people. We know that at one point, William Blount owned as many as 26 slaves. And so we've worked with journalists and organizations in Knoxville to try to tell those stories. You can see the fingerprints of enslaved people, the brick makers, in some of the bricks on Blount Mansion. And in the bottom right-hand corner are archaeologically recovered artifacts from the site of our former slave quarters. Those were dug in the 1990s by archaeologists from UT, and we'll be telling you more about that and how you can use archaeology in your classroom at different grade levels on our Thursday night session. Now, before the pandemic, Blount Mansion's field trip business was going great guns. We had 1,400 students, actually slightly more than that, in calendar year 2019 visit us in person. And they wrote with quill pens. They learned about the US Constitution that Blount signed from one of our board members who is a law professor at a local university. They cooked in our kitchen and enjoyed historic foods, Johnny cakes, and the garden club would come and do hands-on plant experiences in our garden. So that's what we were doing. When we shifted into pandemic mode, we started to reach out and find new ways to enter the classroom. We worked with South Knoxville Elementary, which is down the street, and you'll hear from Principal Dr. Tanna nicely later tonight. And our own educator and local teacher, Karma King, who'll be speaking to you later, to create a historic recipe. We shot a video of Karma cooking in our kitchen, and the kids assembled the ingredients. These are student council members, and they sent a bag of ingredients home with a recipe and a link to the video to every student in the school. So that was a nice kind of like way to get our legs and figure out what to do next. But then we started visiting classrooms, and we've done several of these in-classroom visits, and we'll talk to you about these later tonight. Constitutions and quill pens is exactly what it sounds like. We send in quill pens and ink and copies of the US Constitution and talk about Blount's role in framing our nation's founding document and also our state's. We send in a 15-stripe US flag and a Tennessee flag and talk about symbols and what they mean. And the kids are invited to design their own classroom flag. And we talk about making butter. And this is a project that can be science, it can be agriculture, it can be history. It depends on how you frame it and how you work with us to bring that into your classroom. This just involves mason jars and heavy cream and 15 minutes of shaking, which is also physical education if you do it the right way. We talk about historic newspapers and invite students to learn about the role of newspapers in Tennessee history and write their own newspaper. And then most recently, and don't be distracted by the Dr. Seuss costumes on these kids, we talked about Native American history and did a Cherokee bead craft project. Our educator, Josh Renner, later tonight will talk to you in more detail and show you some videos of what these field trip experiences were like. And we were especially thrilled to be able to take these outside of Knox County and outside of East Tennessee. We visited a class in Middle Tennessee on Friday, and we were in West Tennessee yesterday. So Blount Mansion is expanding its role as Tennessee's birthplace into classrooms all over the state. So with that, I will stop my screen share, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Joshua Kenna from University of Tennessee, who will talk to us about virtual education in general and how it can actually be a plus for your students in your schools.
All right. Thank you, Michael. So I think you can you see that screen?
Yes.
Okay. I got two screens going. And so yeah, Michael reached out to me, I guess almost a year ago now. Not quite a year ago. Because I think from my understanding, you guys were thinking about doing virtual field trips for a long time, but because things were going so well in person, there was no rush. Obviously, pandemic changes that rush factor. Because as I said, they've always been wanting to get into Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee, even maybe beyond Tennessee in some instances. And so obviously the pandemic has changed that a little bit. So one of my areas of research is with virtual field trips. And I'm an associate professor here at UT. Sorry, allergies season is now coming. And I can already sound that I sound different, but obviously you may not know what I sound like. So I might be all good to you. So what I'm going to do, orienting this experience real quick, I only got about 10 minutes, but I'm going to define virtual field trips, talk about a rationale for why using virtual field trips, and briefly talk about some generic types of virtual field trips that are out there. And then, of course, start giving it over to Michael and the rest of the team again for explaining the more specific ones. And he pointed those out right there in his last few slides. But virtual field trips really, it's a structured digital journey that uses websites, primary documents, and other digital resources such as Skype or Google Earth to create a meaningful learning experience. And that's the key part right there, is that bottom one. Historically, virtual field trips really in literature, they kind of started coming about in like the early 1990s with the inception of the internet, and the idea of just that we can show pictures of vast places and read digital texts from the internet. That was seen as a virtual field trip. Many people threw them out as web quests. that you can go on these quests and this digital virtual field trip. And eventually with pictures, 360-degree pictures started coming around. Again, more on a 2D screen though. A lot of museums started using them. I myself started using them the early 2000s in the classroom of Holocaust sites when I taught high school social studies. And it was still just the fact that students can like grab a picture, drag it, and look around. And of course, we could see tourists in the background that were on these tours of these various Holocaust sites that we were looking at. And then, of course, it started expanding beyond just the internet because of Skype and Google Earth, that you can actually now interact with museum um, curators and docents. You can interact with various sites. For a long time, I think the National Park Service, they did what they called electronic field trips, where they would just, a national park person would go through a particular location, and they would video record it. They would have a live group in the recording. So you would get this kind of real sense that they were talking to real students, and you can hear students in the background. And I want to say through email, other people can watch it live through broadcasting and then can send in questions, and there could be this interaction. So electronic field trips, obviously with Twitter and a lot of other social media sites, so we can have this real world interaction now, despite the distance that we might have. And of course, there's value to these virtual field trips, even in a non-pandemic world, that we can visit places in far-flung areas, and not even if you live relatively close to, say, Blount Mansion or other sites. There's a lot of other benefits to virtual, just from the sense of logistical concerns for transportation, collecting funds, and that kind of stuff. So this can save you certainly some time. Now, there's still going to be some new logistical hurdles to overcome and to learn about. But so when we look at virtual field trips, they are intended to be interactive. That's one thing that's a little bit different since the inception of, like, say, the 90s, where it was just looking at a website. Nowadays, you might have seen headsets. I don't think Blount has headsets yet, but people are using these virtual reality headsets as well. Still using 360 images a lot. And of course, in Blount's situation, when they come to you, they're using Zoom, and they're using they're going to hopefully send you real artifacts or replica artifacts and interactive activities to go along with the person on the other side of the camera that you're going to be interacting with. And then, and like real field trips, they are supposed to be guided by what you teach. So the curriculum, the standards, the objectives, and they could take several different forms. They are not simply sightseeing tours, so they're not supposed to be, hey, just let's watch this video, or just let's look at these pictures. They are supposed to be interactive still. And why we do them, just like a real field trip, we do it for the experience. That's really the benefit. I will say there's not a ton of research on this. It's partly because it's so new, and it's so the definition of virtual field trips has changed a lot over the years. So it's hard to pin down adequate research out there. But most research on just general field trips is found that there's social learning, there's cognitive learning, and there's affective learning. And most of the learning with field trips in general is with the affective learning, and that's the learning of wanting to motivate somebody. And so that's where most of the benefits of field trips come, is it motivates people because of that experience to want to learn. And there is still research to suggest that there is some cognitive and, of course, social learning as well with field trips, compared to like a control group who does the same lesson without going to a field trip. There is a couple research studies I'm aware of that do it with virtual field trips. I want to say there was a virtual field trip to the Grand Canyon, and then there was another group who didn't do a virtual field trip. They just did a lesson on the Grand Canyon, and they found there was significant gains, improved gains between the virtual field trip group versus the non-virtual field trip group, not only in the pre-post, but also in a retention test later. But we're also going to be using the Kolb's experiential learning theory a little bit. So this is the whole value of this little talk is, when you're trying to convince a principal or something about why you should do a virtual field trip, is you kind of got a rationale behind this all. But the learning process is whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. And so we continue to say experiential learning is authentic, firsthand, sensory-based learning. Experiential activities explore, touch, listen to, watch, move things, assemble, reassemble. Learning consists of grasping an experience and then transforming it into an application or results. And so you saw with the butter making and the quill pen, you're doing that with Blount Mansion. And of course, they also have some things on YouTube and some other videos where you can actually interact and see some of the actual spaces as well. And just as a quick overview of Kolb's experiential learning theory, there's 4 components to it. It's the concrete experience, the reflective observation, the abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. And it's kind of seen as a cycle here. Doing the virtual field trip would still be, even though it's virtual, it's still a concrete experience for students. And then the idea that they're starting to reflect on it, there's some kind of practice that happens after the experience. I mean, it doesn't have to be super days later. It could be a few minutes after the experience, or even maybe the next day. There's some kind of reflective observation to that experience, whether you're doing a journal entry, a short discussion. There's various forms of reflective observations. And then from there, we start seeing students, hopefully their mind can start to think about that experience. And they start to do some kind of abstract conceptualizations where they're going to learn from that experience, maybe put themselves in new situations in their mind based on that experience. And then that's where the active experimentation comes. They start to plan, they try new things based on that learning. And then of course that leads to a new experience, and it just keeps going. And that's kind of the justification for virtual field trips. Some of the generic ways you can do it, besides just some of the examples that Blount Mansion talked about, if you're comparing geographical formations, say mountains, particularly, you could look at pictures, but there's something about if you put like a 360 virtual headset on, or if you get to a 360 image city on your computer, it's just something about looking at it. It gives students autonomy to kind of click and drag and look around as they want. You might have seen Google Cardboards as well. You can also, same thing with looking at a historical document in a 360 world where students can really look around on their own. There are some people and some companies out there who actually digitize sites. And so quite literally the world you're looking at is a digital world. There's some World War I, for instance, trenches that people have digitally remastered with some work. And then you can look around with headsets or even on a flat screen, a 2D computer screen where you can click and drag. So there's some of those out there as well. But ultimately getting this stuff into your classroom is a valuable experience in and of itself. And so that is kind of the virtual experience. And that's one of the, when Michael reached out to me, it's one of the reasons why we talked about like the flag or the butter making or the quill pen kind of aspect to it as well. And I think that's all I've got.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kenna. And I just put our website and that Tennessee Statehood website in the chat. And you prompted me to talk about something I forgot that I want to mention to everyone, Josh, before I toss to you. If you go to blountmansion.org, which is in the chat there, we've added things to our website that you can use in the classroom. Obviously, education is the first place to look. If you go to resources under the education tab, we've got videos like a 20-minute guided video tour of Blount Mansion, videos about artifacts, videos of Karma King, making food in Blount Mansion kitchen. Also a PDF link to all the standards that Blount Mansion field trips can address. And we're adding lesson plans. We have one now for 5th grade and 8th grade. And also if you click on virtual tour on the top, we have one of those self-guided 360-degree virtual tours that Dr. Kenna talked about. Was paid for by a Tennessee Humanities grant a few years ago, and also the NEH. And so you just, you can move around, walk into the building, and actually see what's inside. And as you go into the rooms, which will take just a second here, there are hotspots where you click on the eye for information, and there's information on the artifacts. So that's all there for you on blountmansion.org. And with that, I will toss it to our education expert, Josh Renner, who can talk to you about some of the virtual field trips that Blount Mansion is offering now. And by the way, we're offering each of you a chance to get one of these virtual visits to your classroom for free. And I'll be telling you more about how to do that in just a minute.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. Hello, I am Joshua Renner. I'm the Education Director here at Blount Mansion, and I will be discussing a couple of our virtual classroom visits and how they can benefit your class. All of our virtual classroom visits consist of interactive PowerPoints made by myself and they all end with a hands-on activity that is provided to you by Blount Mansion in regards to the topic we choose to discuss. There we go. So the first one I'll talk about is our newspaper presentation. In this presentation, I discussed the newspaper in terms of its origins and history on into the 18th century. We also discuss themes a little more abstract, such as how important news is to a growing and widely settled population, and how this population can benefit from reading news. We also take a look at the physical printing techniques of the 18th century through some fun and informative videos. And we also discussed some fun facts, such as how upper and lowercase letters came to be called that because of where the printer would keep his letters individually in a case. Finally, all of our school field trips or classes end with an interactive activity. For this one, I created a faux newspaper titled the South Knox Gazette in reference to Miss Susan Parker's third grade class at South Knoxville Elementary. I then had the students fill out their very own article, complete with a headline and a picture. This activity pairs wonderfully with Tennessee's elementary ELA standards. For instance, this activity pairs with the standard regarding foundational literacy and sentence composition, allowing students to write a cohesive paragraph with a main idea and detailed structure. Tennessee's educational standards are always at the forefront of our mind when we create these classes. And we've been very fortunate to have the local news cover our stories. So here is a news clip talking about this lesson. Let's go ahead and get started.
South Knoxville Elementary School third graders traveled back in time.
Making our own newspaper on paper, we learned about the printing press and how they made newspapers on the printing press.
A first for Briar Smith.
It made me interested and happy kind of.
Historic Blount Mansion educators bringing olden newspaper fun to these students through the magic of Zoom.
Even though there was a sickness going around, we couldn't go there.
Leading them to write their own articles about William Blount, flags, butter, or newspapers. One of the 4 topics the students have been studying over the past few weeks. Briar chose to write and draw William Blount.
I know a lot of information about him, and I'm not really interested in writing about butter.
Inspiration for students writing their articles comes from here, a 223-year-old article about William Blount. Making the field trips fun.
I've enjoyed them very much.
Learning details along the way, including how a printing press worked by printing letters backwards initially so they'd come out forwards.
I think that would be kind of hard.
Gianna Chandler also mentioned how small the letters were.
It's so tiny, you can barely even read it.
Acknowledging what our ancestors did years ago.
A lot of people had to put so much work into it just to make it back in the day.
To appreciate all we have now.
It was definitely very interesting.
In South Knoxville, Ashley Boley, WVLT News.
So next is a program over a topic that is very close to our hearts here at Blount Mansion. This program, titled Constitutions and Quill Pens, revolves around just that. William Blount was the signer of the United States Constitution in 1787, and then helped co-create and sign Tennessee's very own Constitution almost 10 years later in 1796. In this class, we discuss the role that William played in both conventions. We also back up a little bit and talk about the reasons why we needed a Constitution on both the state and national levels, as well as look over what our constitutions do to help us as citizens and what rights they guarantee us. We also look at how these documents were physically created, with a short discussion about paper making and quill pens. All of our programs finish with a hands-on activity, and for this topic, we mail out quill pens and ink for students to try their hand at writing and signing their names, just like our founding fathers. As with all of our educational programs, you'll find this one checks off social studies standards throughout the K through 8 grade range. Miss Angela Knight may be present in our group here tonight. She teaches 4th grade at Mount Pleasant Elementary in Maury County, Tennessee, Middle Tennessee. We visited her class last Friday discussing constitutions and quill pens. Miss Knight, if you're with us tonight, would you care to share your opinion of our presentation?
My students really enjoyed it because we had already been talking about the role that William Blount played in Tennessee becoming a state. We'd already discussed that in social studies. So when you gave us that opportunity, we were able to just link that right in because we had just finished that like a week or so before that. So the name was still familiar to them, and it meant something to them after that a little bit more when they saw that the experience that they had with that. And the writing with the quill pens was just something for them. They're still talking about it. Because they're still in my classroom, and I, put the examples out, and they've told my administrators, they've talked to them about it. So they really enjoyed that. And also the booklets that you'd given, because we have been studying Constitution as well. So it went right along what we were teaching.
Excellent. Yeah, we also, for this presentation, we also supply classrooms with copies of the Constitution. And we encourage children to find William's name in the Constitution, which you can see the child at the top picture is done right there. So these are just a couple of the classes we offer. I want to thank you very much for listening to me. My contact information is on the screen here, education director at blountmansion.org. Feel free to send me an email if you have any questions about what else we can provide or what we can do for your class. And we hope that we can all visit your classrooms someday here in the future.
It's education coordinator at blountmansion.org.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you, Ms. Knight. And I have just added into the chat box a link to a Sign Up Genius. We're offering one free virtual visit from Blount Mansion every Thursday for the rest of the semester. So if you click on that, you can sign up right now. If they all fill up, we'll try to offer some more. I think there's 10 or 12 on there now. It depends on when your semester ends. We're saying it ends right before Memorial Day. We're hoping it does anyway. All right, with that, I will toss it now to Dr. Tanna Nicely. Dr. Nicely is my son's principal at South Knoxville Elementary, and that was my son's hand finding William Blount, which I love it. My kid comes home and tells me about my work. Dr. Nicely is just awesome. She's been an innovative educator for many years in Knox County, has gardened at the White House, and she brings basically her own personal Bible of ideas for hands-on and virtual activities in the classroom. So take it away, Tanna.
Okay, can you see my screen, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Good evening. I cannot say enough. I could probably talk. In fact, I'm going to time myself for 10 minutes because I know your time is very valuable. But I will say that the virtual field trips have been not only an educational endeavor between Blount Mansion, but it's also been a motivator for my students. And you all know, those of y'all that are educators, whether you're a principal or a teacher or a teaching assistant, we need to do everything we can to keep normalcy in our kids' lives. And this bringing the mansion to our kids and bringing a little bit of, hey, it's okay. We're still wearing masks and we're still social distancing, but we are having fun in the classroom. So this is not one. You can reach me. I have my email address, and I follow Twitter, and you can find me on Instagram as well. But I'm just honored to be here, part of such a wonderful, partnership, and just blessed to have Blount Mansion as part of the SKE family. So with that said, I also do a little bit of contract work with the Tennessee Ag in the Classroom, and it's ran through the Farm Bureau of the state of Tennessee. And with Ag in the Classroom, it really fits nicely the curriculum that we use with Ag in the Classroom, with some of the things that Blount Mansion, like making of the butter and using quill pens, and just my interest is really going back to the way we used to do things back in the day. So I just want to I'm a free resource. The things that I do with the Tennessee Farm Bureau, I can mail you or send you whatever you need, or links or whatever. And there's also a national presence with agriculture. So if you want to win a prize, I'm really big on prizes. So comment on this workshop via Twitter. If you use Twitter, tag myself and Blount Mansion. Use hashtag Blount Mansion 2021. And I have already procured a couple of door prizes. So I'll have a couple for tonight and a couple for our next night. And I will get those. I'll find out your contact information and get those to you. But go ahead and start sending us some Twitter feeds, and I'll be looking at it when our next presenters and give you some information about that. But I always like to win prizes. So basically, the few minutes I have, I'm just going to talk to you about food in a historical context. One of the workshops I work on and with Ag in the Classroom is talking about where our food comes from and why it's so important to be good stewards of the earth, because you know as well as I do, if you ask a child where their milk comes from, a lot of times they're going to say it comes from Food City or Kroger. So pushing that root cause or that root analysis of back where, tracing our history. And Blount Mansion does a nice job with their kitchen and with some of the valuable people like Karma King that's going to speak in a few minutes, authentic recipes, and cook in the cookware that was used back in those days to authenticize that. So I'm just really cool about that. I did have to put in a picture of Michelle Obama. We did get to go to the White House and talk a little bit about gardening. And I will say there is a huge history of gardening that connects with our presidents and our state leaders, even in Tennessee. So there's a whole nother night talking about the presidential connection to gardening and the history of our food, especially with Thomas Jefferson. So I won't go into a lot of that. That's another workshop for another night. But Blount Mansion, I go back to Blount Mansion because not only do they have a huge amount of gardens, but they have resources that you can use to get your own garden started, whether it's a production garden, like you can see the raised beds with the First Lady. The children in orange, there are a couple of orange t-shirts. Those are the kids from a school in Knox County that I used to be assistant principal at. So that was definitely a wonderful year. We visited the White House twice, and I hope the gardens are still going on. Go forward to today, and this was last season's garden at South Knoxville Elementary. And I share this picture because if you look in the background, you'll see the city of Knoxville. So we are across the river, across the Gay Street Bridge from the downtown nucleus of Knoxville, and beautiful Blount Mansion that I can't throw a softball, but I can definitely see remnants of the beautiful landscape. But we have several production gardens, raised beds, just a plethora of things. And I would love to give myself credit for that, but I had to give Miss Leffler, a fifth grade teacher, and some wonderful gardening club members from Chapman Highway Gardening Club that run this. The kids are the ones that are the worker bees, and it's a great way to give back to the community. And I never could grow cabbage like this on my farm, so I was very proud of those endeavors. I was asked to share a couple of short little things that you could do to get your kids engaged, and one of them is called a seed identification game. And once again, Blount Mansion does offer those beautiful gardens. But it's also important to note there are a lot of gardening clubs and historical homes across the state of Tennessee that may even offer seed exchange programs to kickstart your own gardening project. I will tell you real quickly that Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home place, we had a wonderful relationship with them. And I started a Jeffersonian heirloom garden at one of my schools as just something to show the kids what heirloom gardening is about. If you've ever worked, though, it's not going to be the beautiful tomatoes that you're going to see that stay on the shelf for 2 weeks, it's really an interesting comparison contrast of how our technology in gardening has changed over the years. So heirloom gardening is a cool thing, though. I love doing it. So that's actually one of our corn plants, and those are just rocks that we found in them and had the kids draw or put the marker because believe it or not, some of our teachers even at my school didn't understand what the different plants were that were coming up. So it was important to be able to identify. And then we had some children that were really smart, and they would change the names. And so we would play a little identification game. But the great thing before we plant the seeds was we would give each of your children, like, pick 10 different seeds kinds: corn, beans, pumpkins, radishes are so small you can barely see them, or carrot seeds. Put them in a Ziploc baggie, give them out to your children, and then have a sheet that has the different fruits or vegetables on it, and have the kids to predict which of the seeds match with the name of the plant. And it's awesome to see, because the kids really, pumpkins are fairly easy to but what about a cantaloupe, or what about zucchini? So it's a great way to test your child's knowledge of if they even know what these seeds produce. So that's a fun way, and it's relatively inexpensive. You can actually go to your local co-op after a season, and a lot of times they'll donate seeds to you, or you can even ask my dad or farmers around the state of Tennessee or the Tennessee Farm Bureau, and they will donate seeds. So that's a fairly inexpensive way to have the kids play a fun game. My second and final thing that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is called Crock Pot Apple Butter. So I've done a lot of research on what presidents did serve in their homes, and our local John Sevier, in his diary, he went to a friend's house and he had, listen to this, guys, this is not Chick-fil-A, carrot pudding, yum, dilled beans, ick, honey apple rings, snow peas, and apple butter. And that was for like a really fancy dinner. And so over the years, I've made lots of apple butter for my family, for my classrooms. But really, with the nutritional guidelines, I know that some of you all are like, how did she get by with that, with all the sugar that goes in the apple butter? I always talk to my district nutritionist, and just sometimes I didn't even talk to them. But the crock pot is a great place to add your apples and the ingredients. And if you all want the recipe for the crock pot apple butter, I will get that to you. It's really simple. It takes all day long. It smells beautiful. You can even cheat and use Comstock apples, but the best crock pot apple butter is the type that you take the time to actually cut up the wine sap apples. And I am proud to say that one of my dear friends that's on this call made me a stirrer. We've actually, I have a huge kettle that I make it outside as well. And my good friend David made me an authentic apple butter stirrer this past year, because apple butter can actually burn you. But the crock pot apple butter is a really great way to make it in your classroom and let the kids sample it. A lot of your kids have never even heard of apple butter. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be able to put that recipe in your chat box. But and then don't forget to be on Twitter, and I'll turn it back over to Michael.
Thank you so much, Tanna. Could you please put that hashtag in the chat that you want people to use too?
I'll do that.
And thank you so much for doing that. You're a marketing genius as well.
Michael, if I could jump in for 1 second.
This is our executive director, David Hearns.
Hello, I'm the executive director, David Hearns. One thing I would like to say too is I've always got basically a suitcase full of seeds. If anybody is looking for something specific, I might be able to help out. So I've always got more than I can use, because Baker Creek and several other seed companies donate to us, and we usually have a seed swap in the spring, but we weren't able to have it last year or so far this year. So if anybody is looking for anything in particular, just let us know and I'll see if I can help you out. You're muted, Mike.
How about that? Blount Mansion is blessed not just with a great historic structure and a beautiful garden, but also with a wonderful crop of volunteers who really carry us and bring so much to our organization. One of the most interesting people who's volunteered with us in a long time is a guy that I met at a standards rollout event where we were exhibiting to teachers as they came and learned about the new state social studies standards. And I heard this booming radio voice. He turned out to be a law professor from Lincoln Memorial University in Knoxville, who has his own radio show called Your Weekly Constitutional and is a constitutional law expert. So he began volunteering with our field trips and is now on our board. And Stuart, if it's okay with you, I'm going to introduce you with your short video that you made last week, because I think it's something that these teachers could use in their classroom. And then Stuart Harris will come back and talk to us about how you can teach the Constitution to your students. So where is my window? Here we go. Are y'all, give me a thumbs up if you can see the video I'm playing here. Oh. Sorry, my drive froze. Hang on.
Hi, my name is Stuart Harris, and I teach constitutional law at Lincoln Memorial University in Knoxville, Tennessee. Long before I went to law school, I learned how a bill becomes a law by watching Schoolhouse Rock. You remember that episode, I'm Just a Bill. You can still see it online, and it holds up really well. But that particular video was about the national government. It was about Washington, D.C., and how Congress and the president create law. The same thing happens in all 50 states. What are the differences? Well, there are 50 different differences because in our federal system, every state has a great deal of power to do things its own way. But for the most part, these 50 states create law the same way the national government does. The beginning of any legislative process is someone comes up with an idea. I think there should be a law. There should be a rule about this or that thing, about this or that problem. That person goes to his or her representative, whether in the House or the Senate of his or her particular state legislature, and says, hey, representative, what do you think about this? And if the representative agrees, he or she then goes back to the legislature and introduces a bill. Now, the details of what happens to that bill differ from state to state, but most of them are going to be referred to some sort of committee, which deals with the subject matter of that particular bill. The state legislature deals with many different problems, and no one legislator can be an expert on all of them. So they divide themselves up into committees. One committee may consider health and human services, another one may consider transportation, things of that sort. And then the committees will typically have hearings if they're serious about the bill, if they really want to pursue it. And they'll bring in experts on that particular subject, and they'll say, hey, Mr. Expert, or hey, Ms. Expert, what do you think about this bill? Is it good? Is it bad? Could we improve it? After it's gone through all of that, that's when the committee decides whether to report it favorably or unfavorably to the full House. This is where most bills die, because most of them, as they say, never get out of committee. They are tabled instead. But if a bill has significant support, the committee will have hearings, the committee will consider it, and then it will report it to the full body that it sits in, whether the House or the Senate, for consideration. Then that full legislative body has to vote on it. And if, and I say if, it gets a majority vote, then it has to go through the whole other process in the other house of that legislature from beginning to end. So most bills do die somewhere along the line. But let's assume for a moment that this bill is very popular. It goes to the other house of the state legislature and it emerges. Well, almost always there are some little differences between the two versions of this bill. So they have to be reconciled in something called a conference committee. Now, assuming that committee can come to an agreement, it gets sent over to the governor of the state, and then he or she can either sign it, in which case it becomes a law, or veto it, in which case it goes back to the legislature, which may let it die or may override that veto, typically with some sort of supermajority. So that's how a bill becomes a law. This all sounds very complicated and lengthy, but don't be discouraged. If you have a really good idea and you think you convince your legislator to introduce it, give it a shot.
Well, I have watched Stuart make the Constitution come alive for groups as young as first graders. So without further ado, Stuart, tell us how to do that magic in a classroom of any grade level.
Hey gang, y'all having a good time? There's no place I'd rather be than on Zoom at quarter to 8 on a Tuesday night. So I understand, but I hope we've made this somewhat valuable for you and somewhat entertaining. The reason I'm here is because William Blount was the signer of the U.S. Constitution, and William Blount, of course, helped to create the Tennessee Constitution. And both of those documents are, well, essentially blueprints for how we govern ourselves. And when you teach to students, whether they are kindergartners or whether they are 12th graders, I think you can convince them, you can engage them simply by pointing out that in our system, nobody is the boss. There is no king. There is no dictator. There is no one person who tells us what to do. We have a system of government that 200 some odd years ago was unique. That is, we do what we think we should do. And we exercise power ourselves, and we exercise it through a government that specifically divides up powers to make sure that no one branch of government, no one person or group of people is preeminent. So that all of us have a say and that all of us govern together. And for the younger audiences, I typically will ask them what they think government is, and I will use their own classrooms as an example of government, where the teacher is effectively the king or the queen, and where she has all powers of government, making the rules, enforcing the rules, and adjudicating disputes under the rules. But as they go through school and as they come closer and closer to adulthood, they will learn how to take on those responsibilities themselves so that they can participate in a government where the legislature makes rules, the executive enforces rules, and the judiciary adjudicates disputes. So I have found at Blount Mansion that every level of student is capable of understanding this, and that all of them, one way or the other, are very interested in it. So I hope that you will work with us and that we can help you in educating your students about the Constitution of both the United States and Tennessee, and of course about government itself. That's about it, Michael.
Well, Stuart, I know also that you point out to, when you're with students at Blount Mansion, and we have you in person, you talk about how William Blount was one of the signers. Does having a signer who lived in Tennessee matter for teachers? I mean, I guess that makes us unique among any state that's not one of the original 13, and there's only a handful of signers houses even in the original states. So are there ways that you can tie the Blount Mansion and William Blount connection into national social studies standards?
Oh, absolutely. Tennessee is unique. We used to be part of North Carolina back when a number of eastern states claimed land all the way to the Mississippi. And William Blount was from North Carolina, and he went to the Constitutional Convention and signed the Constitution as a delegate from North Carolina. Then he came out here as governor of the brand new Southwest Territory and eventually shepherded us into statehood. And absolutely, his house, which he built in 1792 right here in Knoxville, which is well worth a visit, is unique. It is the only house of a constitutional signer outside the 13 original states, as you said, Michael. And I'm a little bit ashamed to say that I had to live here a few years before I even knew that. I heard about this place called Blount Mansion, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And that, to a great extent, is our mission, to let people across this great state know how important Blount was and how unique Blount Mansion is.
All right, well, Stuart, thank you so much for talking to us tonight. And you'll see, if you sign up for the Quill Pens and Constitutions field trip, you'll be seeing another video by Stuart as you present it to your kids.
And that's important because I'm so pretty. Seriously, I admire all of you. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for the last 20 plus years. My sister was a public school teacher for over 30 years. I admire teachers, and I wish you all the very best.
All right, thank you very much, Stuart. We've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to toss it now to our educator and Knox County teacher, Karma King, who's been working with Blount Mansion for years. Karma, is it okay if I show a little bit of your video first and then have you talk about that and anything else you want to add? Karma's muted.
And
okay, there she is.
yes, that would be great. I'm sorry, I was waiting for Dave to speak.
Oh, he's going to. All right, let's see. I'm going to take us back to the Blount Mansion website here, and we're going to go back to, again, the education page is where you can find this video. Click on resources, and Karma is right now at the bottom right-hand corner.
Hi guys, my name's Karma King. This is my daughter Kendra Seal. That's really hard because normally I say she's Kendra King. To remember that she's married. We are making 3 sisters today. This is a recipe that my mother learned from her mother, who learned it from the Cherokee in the Maryville area. 3 sisters is a meal consisting of some white beans, some butternut squash, and corn. Now I'm going to put an onion in it because I like the flavoring with the onion in it. But this is special to the Cherokee and to actually many Native American tribes because it was used as the women were doing the planting of the seeds. They planted the corn, and then the corn would grow tall, and as the corn grew, they planted the beans so that the beans would grow around the corn stalk. And then they planted the squash on the ground at the bottom of the corn so that it would grow kind of as a ground cover that would keep the weeds down. And so they called it the 3 sisters. They grew it together and they cooked it together. We've had our beans on cooking for a while. It takes hours for beans to get cooked. We start with dried beans, and they're about ready to go. We're trying to get the butternut squash. We're going to get it peeled and then cut into cubes, which we are then going to put in the water.
All right, that's probably the most relaxing video that we have in our entire collection. So you can watch the rest of it on the website. But Karma, tell us a little bit about yourself for those teachers who don't know you, how long you've been teaching and what you do in the classroom, and also what you do at Blount Mansion and other historic sites in Knox County.
That was a lot. Okay. I've been teaching, I don't know, like 26 years. I've taught elementary. I teach middle school now. I've worked with Tanna nicely. And I've worked with Dean Burris, who I see is out there tonight. My family, I raised my kids as 18th century reenactors. So we've lived the 18th century life for years and years and years. So we love to do things like cooking, textiles, working with animals. It's just part of how I've raised my kids. I love working at Blount Mansion in the kitchen because it allows me to cook in, in a spot where William Blount lived. I get to cook over the fire that is typical of his time period, and it's a lot of fun. We did 3 sisters because of its tie to the Native Americans. They're very practical people, and the whole idea of raising the 3 ingredients in a way that each one had a role, and then to use those 3 ingredients in the dish just kind of brings it all together. And whereas I'm not Native American, we certainly share our heritage with the Native Americans. So it's just a really cool thing to do. We've done this video for South Knox Elementary and then anybody else that Blount Mansion uses it with. We've also, with Blount Scholars that I think Dave's going to tell you about, we've had high school kids come in and we've made it with them. And we've also had the opportunity to make other meals with the Blount Scholars. So it's just something that we do. And there are ways that you guys can use it in your classrooms. Tanna was able to put the ingredients together with a recipe and send it out to all the families in her school, which was really cool, so that they could all experience it themselves in this century as opposed to the 18th. They didn't have to use a fire like I did. And you can use it in your classroom. You can put this in a crock pot and make it. Back when I used to teach elementary, I made it over a little hot burner, but we'd probably get in trouble doing that now. But certainly a crock pot would do great. And then you can share this story about the Native Americans and the history of this area.
And Karma is also volunteering at Blount Mansion. She's spinning and weaving in our upstairs visitor center. So you can look for many more videos with Karma coming soon as she kind of explores 18th century lifeways with us. Anything else you want to add for the teachers that are here tonight from your years of trying to share the past and make it come alive?
Well, there were lots of ways that I was able to when I taught elementary school. I think you get by with more in elementary school than you do in middle school. Like I have actually had 5th graders help me prepare an outdoor meal with a dad who's a fireman watching over our fire. I've made the Thanksgiving meal for the kindergarten classes. So they all came out in their little outfits they'd made with their little Indian hats and their little pilgrim vests. And we actually fed them as if we were doing a Thanksgiving. There's lots of ways to use history in our classrooms. I've certainly used quill pens. I've even made teas before with my kids so that they could experience what the actual 18th century type tea tasted like, what the hot chocolate, which had no sugar in it, tasted like. There's just lots of things you can do that can bring history to life for your kids in the classroom.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm cutting everybody short. I want to respect the time. We've kind of given you like a smorgasbord of what Blount Mansion and our volunteers and our family does. We hope to do more of these PDs later where we focus on one thing. So maybe we'll do all archaeology one night, maybe all Karma and cooking and lifeways on another night. I don't know. That's a surprise for Karma, but we'll be telling you more about that. I know that some may have to go, and I want to bring our executive director back in, but really quickly before we do that, I have a survey for you to fill out virtually, and I'm going to put the link to this in our chat. Everybody who fills it out and sends it in to us will be entered in a drawing for a $25 Visa gift card. And this is also our backstop to make sure that we don't miss anybody giving you credit. And we will be glad to email you a PDF certificate for your participation tonight. So again, that's in the chat. I'll also send it out in an email to all of you. So you'll get it a second way. Our executive director, David Hearns, is going to be our last presenter tonight. And we did a really extensive hands-on small group upper grades history program called Blount Scholars, which was just awesome. We took a break from it for a while to focus on younger kids because we realized that the standards were changing and we had an opportunity to kind of tell our story to a new audience that way. And we're still working on ways to make it work virtually. But Dave, is there anything you want to say about what you're working on for the future and what these educators can look forward to on our website and with our virtual experiences too?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that I could say is that we're always looking to add to our virtual menu. So there's some topics and some major topics that we haven't talked about tonight. The history of the enslaved. There are women's history topics. There are other hands-on, trades topics that we haven't done, like timber framing, blacksmithing, these kind of things that we are we're working with some of our volunteers, some of our friends to be able to create. And we're really trying to offer a very wide menu to teachers to be able to say, I'd love for you to be able to put together some learning experiences for, say, these 3 or 4 topics, and we can either do them all in one day or we could break them up over several visits and deep dive on topics. But we don't shy away from the more painful parts of our history, especially when it comes to things like slavery, Indian removal, things like that are topics that we're actively working on and covering in as many ways as we can. One thing that we'd love to hear from you guys, especially if you're going to, as everybody fills out the survey forms, please tell us what you want us to create for you. If man, I always have a hard time covering, this particular topic, let us know. There might be a way we can develop something that makes your life easier. So, and I'm sure that if it makes your life easier, make your colleagues' lives easier as well. So tell us what you want and we'll do our best to try to create it for you. We're very responsive in that way. When we did Blount Scholars, as Michael was saying, we basically focus group with teachers and with students to find out what they wanted to do, the things they wanted to see, and we built the entire program around their desires. So please tell us what you want and we'll do our best to try to create it for you. We really appreciate you all coming tonight. I know there's a lot of things everybody'd rather be doing on a Tuesday night, but hopefully this was worth it. And we hope to see you, hear from you and to see you again soon.
Thanks, Dave. And we'll be back Thursday night. I'll cover a little bit of the same Blount Mansion story in the very beginning for folks who are not here tonight, but Thursday night session will be a totally different slate of information for you. And again, check out blountmansion.org. We're adding resources there all the time. And I should mention too that the Sign Up Genius that I created just listed a placeholder field trip for every Thursday for the rest of the semester. If you really want to do one and you can't do it on Thursday morning, just email us at Josh's email, which is educationcoordinator@blountmansion.org, and we'll find a time that we can do it for you. Our hope is that we can, as we do this more often, find donors to fund large amounts of these so we can just get out into classrooms all over the state. But we're doing them this semester at our cost so that we can work with you. And with that, I think we're about ready to end it. Unless anybody has a question that they want to, or something they want to say to the group, we'll be glad to keep the meeting open. But other than that, that's the end of our program. So thanks a lot. Please fill out the form. And also, I think, Tanna, did you pick a winner already? You did. Okay. And that's in the chat. All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.
We'll leave the meeting open for a few minutes if anybody wants to ask questions, and then we'll shut it down in a minute. We hope to see you again Thursday night. Thanks for coming.
Great job. You guys did awesome.
Thanks, Layla.
Yeah, it was awesome. I'm so glad. I'm excited for Thursday too. I'm going to tune in.
Awesome. You had another presentation earlier tonight, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a webinar from 5 to 6-ish. Sorry, my dog's drinking water in the background. That's what you get when you have a lab. Yeah, so we had 5 to 6, and then I had a little break and I hopped on here with you guys. So this was fantastic. I loved all the resources. I tweeted and put y'all's website on my Twitter. So hopefully that'll get a good response. I'm super excited. This was fantastic.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing you and Lisa Thursday morning for our video shoot too.
Yes, I'll be ready for you Thursday morning. Y'all have a good night.
All right. Thank you, Layla. I think, Ms. Todd, if you're trying to ask something, you need to unmute. There you go.
I'm in Murfreesboro. This is late for teachers. Thank you so much. I was interested in this. I'm a speech language therapist and a TVI. I work with lots of children with special needs, but my mom said the last time that I was at the Blount Mansion was in 1982 at the World's Fair.
Wow.
So I was kind of excited to see this come up, and I'm sure it's changed a lot since I saw it, but I appreciate everybody's work in bringing this up, and especially the emphasis on the Native Americans, because I think that gets scooted to the side a lot, and the slavery part. But I just wanted to tell you guys, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure, thank you. Coming. The important things have not changed, but we're always working to improve.
I'm sure it has. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
All right. Well, Dave, if you'll send me the link of the recording, I'll put it in on our YouTube and send it to all the participants too.
Yeah.
No problem. I'll see you later.
Thank you, Stuart.
Bye, Stuart. Thanks.
All right.
Joshua, Kenna, I want your microphone. That thing looks fabulous.
Yeah, it's a snowball, and then I've had the snowball for a while, but then I got the mic and like a filter so people didn't hear me breathing as much.
That's pretty slick.
So
I've got the Larry King, but I never use it. You know, yeah, I'm plugged in. Go ahead. You're
I
on the
enjoy
air.
having it. I enjoy having it. I think it sounds a little better than the regular microphone that's on the laptop.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I think this was great tonight.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I thought it went well.
Ladies and gentlemen, sorry. Thank you, Tanna.
All right. Well, y'all have a good one.
All right.
Thanks, Joshua.
Josh, were you going to come Thursday night, or you? I know you're.
No,
not.
I can't. I have class, and
Okay.
and so since I'm not going to be there for the beginning, I mean, I could have made the beginning. I would have had to bug out early
Sure.
anyways, but I figured I just probably won't show up then.
All right. Well, thanks again. We appreciate you.
No problem.
All right. Take care.
It's good to see you, Tanna.
Karma, great job. This is fun.
Thank you, Karma.
Oh,
Sorry.
Thank you.
All righty. I will see. I guess we'll go on and end it. Night, everybody.
See ya.
See you, Josh.